There's a very specific kind of regret that almost no retiree ever admits in public. It doesn't show up on statements. It doesn't turn into advice at dinner parties. And it's rarely talked about with their kids. Because at the moment it happened, it felt like the right decision. It was logical. It was defensible. It was even praised. Years later, the person still has the money, still has security, still has stability. But every time they look at what they bought, there's a discomfort that's hard to explain. And the most uncomfortable part isn't the price. It's realizing that the decision didn't improve life, it just took up space. Let me ask you a strange question. If those purchases were so right, why do so many retirees avoid talking about them? It's not shame, it's something else. Something that only makes sense after the paycheck stops, after time changes value. After the body starts voting on past decisions, there's one specific purchase that looks healthy, productive, even inspiring. It never sounds like waste. It never sounds like luxury. In fact, it's usually defended as a life plan. But when it fails, and it often does, the regret doesn't show up as a financial loss. It shows up as silence. And later on, when this clicks, you'll understand why free time doesn't create anything by itself. 1. Buying something just to enjoy the last year of a high salary. Many retirees tell this story in a low voice, almost like a secret. The final bonus hits, the paycheck is still coming in full, and that treacherous feeling shows up. Now I can. It's not a rational retirement planning decision. It's emotional, almost automatic. The mind calls it a reward, but underneath, the driver is fear. Fear that the pace, the status, the sense of security are about to end. And that's how one of the classic retirement mistakes is born. Spending to numb anxiety. In that moment, the item being bought carries a different meaning. It's not just a car, a watch, or an expensive trip. It's a symbol of closing a chapter. But symbols are expensive when they're confused with strategy. While the retiree believes they're celebrating, they may actually be creating a problem for their own retirement savings. I've seen people justify it this way. It's the last time I'll do this before I really figure out how to retire. The detail they miss is simple. Money doesn't know it's the last time. When the paycheck stops hitting every month, something shifts quietly. What once felt light starts to feel heavy. The object stops being a reward and becomes a responsibility. Maintenance shows up. Taxes arrive. The psychological cost grows. And the retiree realizes too late that the purchase didn't bring financial freedom. It just reduced options. Instead of flexibility, they locked up resources that could have helped them retire early with far less stress. A common example is upgrading the car because now I can afford it. The problem isn't the car, it's the timing. Money that could have stayed invested, working quietly as part of investing for retirement and acting as an emotional buffer, gets turned into idle metal. And when something unexpected happens, health issues, family needs, market turbulence, the real cost of that choice becomes clear. It's one of those 400k mistakes that doesn't show up on the statement in the first month, but screams later. What's most telling is that this kind of purchase almost always comes with a dangerous phrase. I deserve it. Maybe you do, but you deserve peace, not future tension. Real retirement tips rarely feel exciting in the short term. And that's where the mind starts pulling another thread, a deeper fear of owing something to someone, of not being settled with the world. And once that fear enters the equation, decisions get even more expensive. Let me tell you something a little uncomfortable. If you still believe retirement is just about saving more money, this channel isn't for you. But if this video made you even slightly uncomfortable, that kind of discomfort that feels like this touched something I hadn't thought about, then subscribe now and hit like. Not because you agree, but because you realized that thinking differently is no longer optional. 2. Paying everything off at once out of fear of owing anyone. There's an almost instinctive impulse that shows up as retirement gets closer. I can't owe anyone anything. It's as if financial freedom only exists once every balance is zero. Mortgage, car loan, old debts, everything becomes the enemy. It sounds prudent, but it hides one of the quietest retirement mistakes of all. The goal isn't financial efficiency, it's emotional relief. On the surface, it sounds noble. I entered retirement debt-free. But in practice, many people trade flexibility for a false sense of control. Paying everything off at once often drains a meaningful portion of retirement saving. right when active income is about to disappear. The money leaves the account, liquid, adaptable money, and turns into walls, deeds, concrete, emotional security, high financial cost. The problem is that the impact doesn't show up the next day. It shows up months later, when the retiree looks at the balance and realizes they now depend much more heavily on Social Security or fixed withdrawals. The monthly bills still arrive, but the margin for maneuver is gone. And that's when what felt like a smart retirement planning move starts generating anxiety, not because of debt, but because of a lack of access to their own money. A classic example is the mortgage. In many cases, keeping a low-interest loan while leaving money invested can be healthier than paying everything off. It's not about loving debt. It's about understanding context. I've seen retirees pay off their homes only to need expensive lines of credit a few years later to handle healthcare costs or help family members. This doesn't show up in basic how to retire guides, but it happens all the time. The key point is this: financial freedom doesn't come from the total absence of debt. It comes from the ability to choose. When all your wealth is locked up, that choice disappears. And interestingly, this same impulse to fix everything right now doesn't stop here. It shows up again, disguised as another common, almost automatic decision: buying something big, so I won't have to worry about it later. 3. Buying a new car, thinking, I won't want to replace it later. This decision usually comes wrapped in logic that seems flawless. I'll buy it now, pay it off while I'm still working, and never have to think about it again. It sounds organized, responsible, almost like a textbook example of solid retirement planning. The problem is that this logic ignores a variable that never shows up on spreadsheets. Life changes. The mistake isn't the car, it's the timing. In the first few months, it feels like a job well done. The car is in the driveway, fully paid. That new car smell, no payments. But the pace of life changes quickly. Retirement isn't endless vacation. It's a new way of living. Driving starts to feel more tiring. Trips become fewer. And the car spends more time parked than moving. Meanwhile, the money that could have strengthened retirement savings is locked into something that only loses value. This is a classic retirement mistake because it feels prudent in the short term. The retiree thinks they're preventing a future problem, but they create another one: lack of liquidity. I've seen people with excellent investing for retirement histories grow uneasy when they realize a meaningful portion of their wealth has turned into metal quietly depreciating. The car doesn't generate income, doesn't adapt, doesn't negotiate. It just ages. A simple example makes this clear. Imagine someone who buys an expensive car at 62, thinking they're taking care of it once and for all. By 67, they barely drive, prefer ride shares or getting a lift, and realize that money would make far more sense supplementing withdrawals, reducing pressure on the 401k, or giving more breathing room for Social Security decisions. But the money is no longer there. The point isn't to demonize comfort. It's to align choices with the stage of life. Effective retirement tips don't eliminate pleasures. They avoid rigidity. And interestingly, this same mindset of getting everything done now doesn't stop with the car. When it moves inside the house, the financial and emotional impact is often even greater. 4. Doing a major renovation to retire with everything ready. Few decisions feel as logical as renovating the house before retirement. A new kitchen, magazine-worthy bathrooms, everything done the right way for the next phase of life. On the surface, it's comfort. Underneath, it's control. The renovation becomes a quiet attempt to organize the future before it arrives. And that's how an emotional expense disguises itself as well-executed retirement planning. During the renovation, the person feels in charge. They choose materials, approve layouts, resolve long-standing issues. That creates a sense of progress at the exact moment when the career is winding down. But that energy, financial and mental, gets drained right before a major transition. Money that could have strengthened retirement savings gets locked into decisions that are hard to reverse. The problem shows up later. Many of these projects are designed for who the person was, not for who they're about to become. High countertops, tubs that are hard to step into, layouts that look beautiful but aren't very practical. I've seen retirees spend heavily to make everything perfect, only to need another round of changes a few years later. The cost doubles. So does the regret. In many cases, a smaller renovation focused on functionality would have been far smarter. Discrete handrails, better lighting, wider doorways, simple adjustments. That aligns with how to retire peacefully. But those choices don't feed the ego or deliver the thrill of a big project, so they're often overlooked. What's most interesting is that this urge to make everything flawless doesn't stop with the house. It starts migrating to money. The person begins seeking closed structures, definitive solutions, products that promise to have everything taken care of. And that's where many retirees step into complex financial decisions, believing they're buying peace of mind. 5. Buying complex financial products to sleep peacefully. As retirement approaches, the word that shows up most in conversations isn't return, it's peace. And that's exactly where complex financial products enter the picture. Annuities packed with clauses, sophisticated insurance policies, structures that are hard to explain in 2 sentences. The promise is seductive: guaranteed income, controlled risk, absolute peace of mind. A perfect pitch for anyone afraid of making retirement mistakes. At first, everything seems to work. The money feels protected, the statement doesn't swing as much, and the retiree feels like they made the right move within their retirement planning. The problem is that this peace is often temporary. Over time, a need for adjustment appears. An unexpected expense, a change of plans, an opportunity, and that's when the unpleasant surprise shows up. The money doesn't respond. The real cost of these products is rarely explicit. It shows up as a lack of flexibility, surrender charges, long lockup periods, rigid rules. I've seen people with excellent investing for retirement track records feel trapped by their own money, unable to react without penalties. The promised tranquility quietly turns into frustration. A common example is annuities sold as a universal solution. For some profiles, they make sense. For many, they don't. The issue isn't the instrument itself. It's the belief that there's something that solves everything. Effective retirement tips teach adaptability, not rigidity. Money in retirement needs to breathe along with life. And when retirees start feeling that their money is tied up, an almost automatic compensating impulse appears. They begin looking for real assets, something they can touch, use, see. And that's when many end up turning their attention to additional real estate, believing they're choosing safety. 6. Buying a property with future use in mind. The idea usually sounds mature and well thought out. A vacation home, a condo for later, a piece of land as a backup plan. On paper, everything fits. A solid asset, protection against inflation, something tangible to call your own. Within the traditional logic of retirement planning, it almost feels like an obvious move. But the mistake isn't the purchase itself. It's underestimating the invisible cost that comes with it. Real estate isn't just an acquisition. It demands constant attention. Property taxes, maintenance, HOA fees, insurance, a stream of small decisions that never really end. For someone still in an active career, that's an annoyance. For a retiree, it becomes mental weight. I've seen people buy a property thinking they were buying freedom, only to create a new list of obligations competing with the time that was supposed to feel light. There's also the illusion of use. When I retire, I'll spend more time there. Sometimes that happens. Often, it doesn't. Daily routines change less than expected. Energy levels fluctuate. Travel feels more tiring. The property sits empty, but the costs stay fully active. And that's when the retiree realizes that part of their retirement savings is tied up in something that isn't delivering the emotional return they imagined. From a financial perspective, rigidity shows up again. Unlike liquid investments, selling a property takes time, involves taxes, and depends on the market. In moments of need, health issues, family support, adjustments around Social Security, that lack of agility matters. It's one of those retirement mistakes that looks harmless at first, but charges a toll later. What's interesting is that many of these purchases come from genuine enthusiasm, real dreams, good intentions. But intention doesn't replace adaptation. And when that initial excitement doesn't match reality, it often nudges the retiree toward another common mistake: pouring money into hobbies that don't yet exist, believing that free time alone will magically make everything fall into place. Do a quick test with me, and don't overthink it. Which one of these 3 words bothers you the most right now? Time, body, money. Write just one in the comments. If you pick the right one for you, the rest of this video is going to hit differently. 7. Spending heavily on hobbies that didn't yet exist. Retirement creates a quiet fantasy. When I have time, I'll finally do this. A boat, a fully equipped workshop, expensive gear, professional instruments. The purchase comes before the practice. The person isn't investing in a hobby. They're buying a future identity. Emotionally, it makes sense. From a retirement planning perspective, not always. The problem is that free time doesn't automatically create passion. I've seen retirees buy boats and use them twice a year. Fully built workshops that turn into storage rooms. Top-of-the-line equipment gathering dust. The initial excitement fades quickly, but the cost remains. This is one of the most common retirement mistakes because it's born from enthusiasm, not real experience. There's also a physical variable that's almost always ignored. The body changes. Energy, stamina, joints. What felt easy at 55 isn't the same at 65. And when the body doesn't keep up, the hobby turns into frustration. Money that could have strengthened retirement savings or provided more flexibility for social security decisions ends up tied to unused objects. A wiser approach would be to test before committing heavily. Rent. Try. Start small. Want a sail? Take lessons. Rent a boat for a while. Interested in woodworking? Begin with basic tools. Effective retirement tips always favor experimentation before commitment. That applies just as much to investing for retirement as it does to life itself. Interestingly, when this kind of purchase doesn't deliver the expected joy, discomfort shows up in another way. The retiree becomes more aware of the body, more present, more limited. And that's when another quiet regret surfaces, focusing on aesthetic comfort instead of planning for future adaptation. 8. Buying comfort without thinking about future adaptation. Many comfort choices work perfectly. For a while, beautiful staircases, low sofas, elegant layouts. Everything feels great at 60. The problem is that retirement isn't a frozen moment. It's a process. And some decisions only reveal their cost when the body starts sending the bill. This is one of those retirement mistakes that doesn't hurt at first, but becomes a daily annoyance later. In the beginning, no one notices. The house looks great, gets compliments, and delivers a sense of personal victory. But small details start to add up. Getting up from the couch takes effort. Climbing stairs feels more tiring than it should. The bathroom becomes less practical. It's not drama, it's physiology. And fixing it later costs more, requires construction, planning, and patience. Exactly what the retiree was trying to avoid. From a retirement planning perspective, the mistake isn't seeking comfort. It's confusing aesthetic comfort with functional comfort. I've seen people with solid retirement savings forced to spend unexpected amounts just to correct recent choices. The money leaves twice, first to beautify, then to make things usable. Simple examples would have made all the difference. Slightly higher sofas, bathrooms with discrete grab bars, fewer level changes, better lighting. These aren't magazine-worthy choices, but they show up in daily life. Real retirement tips are rarely glamorous. They're quietly effective, like a smart investing for retirement decision that only reveals its value years later. And when these limitations start to appear, something interesting happens. The discomfort doesn't come only from the body, it comes from pride. The person realizes that certain purchases weren't made to live better, but to look successful. And that's where we enter one of the regrets most closely tied to ego. 9 buying symbols of personal victory. As retirement approaches, many people feel the need to mark the moment. An expensive watch, a style upgrade, a status item that signals achievement. It's not about usefulness, it's about meaning. The purchase becomes a way to tell the world, and yourself, I made it. So the problem is that symbols rarely carry the emotional weight they promise. And that's how another quiet retirement mistake is born. At first, there's pride. The object represents years of effort, long nights, good decisions. But time passes, and the meaning fades. The watch becomes just a watch. The luxury item becomes routine, and the retiree realizes they tried to close an external chapter when the adjustment that was needed was internal. No object resolves the psychological transition into retirement. Financially, these purchases often seem small compared to the total portfolio. It won't make a difference to my retirement saving, but the issue isn't the isolated amount, it's the pattern. When symbols replace reflection, money starts being used to validate identity, and that weakens future retirement planning decisions because ego now has a seat at the table. I've seen people with excellent investing for retirement track records feel strangely empty after these acquisitions. It wasn't a lack of money, it was a lack of direction. The promised financial freedom didn't come with the object. What came instead was the uncomfortable question, now what? And when that question shows up, many try to answer it by buying more control, more safety, more structure. What's striking is that at this point, some retirees begin to realize they traded something valuable without noticing. It wasn't just money. It was moments, experiences, life deferred in the name of always being prepared. And that tends to be the deepest regret of all. The one that doesn't fit in a shopping bag and never shows up on a statement. Trading experiences for a sense of control. This mistake almost never feels like a mistake when it's happening. Quite the opposite. It sounds responsible, mature, intelligent. Trips get postponed. Get-togethers are pushed back. Experiences are delayed until everything is organized. The retiree believes they're making the right choice within their retirement planning. But quietly, they start buying control instead of life. The reasoning is usually the same. Once everything is aligned, then I'll enjoy it. The problem is that life doesn't work like a spreadsheet. The money stays there, intact, growing inside retirement savings. Time doesn't. And that's a gap no amount of investing for retirement can make up for later. Control offers immediate security, but it charges high emotional interest in the future. It's common to hear stories of people who delayed trips waiting for the perfect moment. When that moment finally arrived, the body no longer cooperated, the energy was different, or the companion was no longer there. Social Security was still coming in. The 401k was fine, but the lost experience had no replacement. This is one of the hardest retirement mistakes to admit because it doesn't show up as a bad expense. It shows up as prudence. Retirement tips rarely talk about this clearly, but it needs to be said. Experiences are not the enemy of security. Many times, they're part of it. They create memory, purpose, presence. I've seen retirees who were far more at peace financially because they lived well, not because they controlled everything. Financial freedom isn't just about owing nothing. It's about being able to say yes while it still makes sense. And when someone realizes they traded life for control, something shifts deeply. The question stops being, how much do I have? And becomes, what am I waiting for? And that question often leads to an even bigger reassessment. Not just of money, but of the entire way retirement was built from the very beginning.